Hey everyone, how you doing? So, Battle for Neighborville's character roster. Yeah, this is certainly a roster of all time. 23 characters that are more or less unique in many ways. Now, these characters nowadays might be interesting, but their history within the game itself has a whole other story to tell. And actually, I went over that story for the plants in the game previously. But the zombies. Ooh, the zombies. These are the characters that have the real story to tell. So in today's video, I'm going to cover the extensive patch note history of BFN's finest undead fighters. And before this video starts, I'd like to real quick mention that I actually am covering all of the patches because of my plant video. Yeah, I may or may not have left out a couple by accident. That's embarrassing. But this time around, we're covering all of them. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so like in my last video, I won't be going over Picnic too much. This is a time period that I hardly know anything about at the moment. But with that being said, I'm actually planning on making a Founders video in the future, and I've uncovered some stuff that I thought I'd throw into this video. So just as a few examples, Soldier could hit 6 and 7 damage, Electric Slide had 14 ammo, and the sprinting FOV was weirdly altered. All of this and more that I can try to uncover were just before the game went into early access. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, I'm not going to add more here, but just know that there were some really interesting differences in the cast and in how the game actually looked too. But okay, now we can move on to the first update, that being... Okay, so now we're in the actual updated game, and ooh, the zombies got some pretty cool changes. Now, during this time period, the zombies were kind of fricked because they were, well, just not that good. So PopCap got right to work on buffing most of them, only leaving out Scientist in the patch. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Foot Soldier is first, and he got a damage increase on his primary, as well as a rate of fire buff too. On top of this, he also got buffs to 2 of his abilities as well. Now, I'm sure quite a few of you already know this, but back in the day, Foot Soldier was weak. So any buff for him in this stage of the game is a good buff in my eyes. Imp is next, and he got bug fixes. Nothing too crazy, we'll just move on. Superbrain's got several nerfs to his shield and a few nerfs to reach. Now, if you don't know what old reach looked like, this is what we're seeing here. My boy 80's got some changes, and it was mostly for reworking his rocket ride. There's also a leg day change here, but really it doesn't matter much. Moving on. Electric Slide and Deadbeard both got fixes to their form abilities, and Deadbeard also got a buff to how quickly he can light the fuse on the barrel after entering it. Nothing too crazy, but I'd say it's pretty interesting nonetheless. All-Star got a massive buff to his football cannon, as well as some input changes and a priming time buff to his primary after he successfully hit somebody with a sprint tackle. Now, the damage buff might seem unnecessary, but you have to remember what this time period was. For reference, Nightcap's old Fung Fu was considered broken, and you could see the damage it does now. The game's TTK was not good back in the day, so this made All-Star's buff that much more meaningful. Space Cadet got a fix to her Big Bang Beam and a huge buff to her efficiency upgrade. Nothing too crazy here, but it's worth mentioning since I'm covering as much of the changes as possible. And finally, Engineer got some minor buffs that I'm too small-brained to understand. So that was Founders in October 2019 for BFN. Overall, it's looking like some humble beginnings for the zombies. But trust me, things only get crazier as we go on, so let's continue. November brought some pretty minor changes to the zombie roster, with quite a few characters being left out. In particular, those who missed out were 80's, Deadbeard, All-Star, and Space Cadet. So with that being mentioned, let's jump into the characters that did get some changes. First of all, Soldier got an adjustment to the spawn location and trajectory of his Super Stink Cloud. Imp got a massive buff to his mech's cooldown, now only being 60 seconds when he first spawns into a match, and 90 for any subsequent mech he gets. Now this is a pretty big change for him, because the old times were much cooler. So it's nice to see he got this change when he did. Superbrains received a massive beatdown in November, with a lot of his changes focusing on nerfing his kit. To compensate for this, his Heroic Fists got a length and width increase. Now for those of you who've watched me long enough, you know what I'm gonna say, BFN's hit detection is awful. So with that being said, you can imagine how I feel about the November changes for this poor guy. Yeah, I think they were awful. Hopefully December treats him better, because yikes. Electric Slide and Engineer got a couple of bug fixes, but for Scientist, I wanted to save him specifically for last because he just got nerfed. He got nerfed so hard into the ground in this update. Now, to be fair, Scientist was broken back in the day, but still, this is ridiculous. So November was a small month, but the next month would be crazy, with that being December for BFN. This was the month where the TTK for the characters went down all across the board. Oh, and before I forget to mention this like I did in the last video, everyone also got accuracy buffs this month, so I figured I'd throw that in before we get right into it. So now let's go. Foot Soldier got a huge set of primary weapon buffs, with the weapon now being pretty close to what we have nowadays. This made Foot Soldier pretty playable, so it's nice to see the changes were made. Imp also got a bunch of buffs, with almost all of these having to do with his primary, Imp Kata, and Robo Laser. Now his mech actually did get a damage reduction, but it's honestly so minor that I hardly consider it to be much of a nerf to begin with. So yeah, Imp got some changes that makes him viable. Nice. Super Brains basically got Ultra Flying Fist buffs, as well as a shield buff too. Not too bad. 80s finally got his first set of big changes, and these were seemingly pretty big for him too. It's nothing but massive buffs for him, and that's awesome. If you couldn't tell, I'm a diehard 80s fan, so I will gladly praise any changes given to him. Slide got possibly the craziest primary buff in the entire patch across both teams, with her Boogie Bolt now dealing 18 damage. Holy frick. Oh, and it got nerfed later, never mind. Still though, that is insane, and honestly, it makes her one of the characters that I think we should keep an eye on moving forward. Deadbeard's list is pretty huge too, though it matches pretty closely with Cactus's list, so there's not much I have to say here. Yeah, with both characters being basically the same, my comments on their changes for the damage are also the same. Neat. All-Star received a damage buff that basically puts him back to Garden Warfare 2 standards. And yeah, needless to say, that is disgusting. There's more changes to his primary, but frankly, who cares? All-Star just turned into a nightmare. PopCap is certainly a balancing team of all time. Space Cadet's finally making a splash in this video, with their primary getting buffed, as well as Crater Maker getting a slight rework that overall makes him more consistent, but not as good as it was previously. Big Bang Burst also got a buff, and that's all I've got to say. Cool stuff. Scientist got nothing but buffs in this update, with it pretty much being all around how much ammo he has and his healing. That's about it, but it's still pretty good stuff. And last, but certainly not least on our list, is Engineer. And wow, his changes were disgusting. His primary's maximum damage output went from 27.2 to 37.8. He did get minor nerfs to the splash and shockwave radiuses, but that does not matter when the buff is this major. Frankly, his other changes are small fry compared to these. So December was an all-around good month for the zombies. Well, most of them at least. But regardless, that wouldn't change how the new year went for the game, so let's continue onward to This month had a bunch of big changes for only a few characters. It's pretty weird, honestly. The ones who were left out were Deadbeard, Space Cadets, and Scientist. I don't have much else to say, so let's get talking. Frankly, I don't know what to make of Foot Soldier's changes here. He overall got a pretty major recoil nerf, and his rapid fire upgrade also got nerfed. This was a rough time for the poor guy, I feel for him. Imp also got huge recoil nerfs, and these were arguably even worse than Soldier's due to the fact that Imp already doesn't have good recoil. Yikes. Super Brains got some buffs, so that's good to see. Oh, and they tried to change his hit detection again. Try again, PopCap. Maybe one day you'll figure out how to make it good. 80's got some Rocket Ride nerfs, and that's all she wrote. Moving on. Electric Slide got an increase to the amount of hits required to stun enemies. And yes, astute viewer, that does say 4. The modern day stun is like double that. What the frick happened? There's 2 other nerfs here, but frankly, I don't know enough about them to tell you what they mean, so let's move on. All-Star got some huge changes to his primary, which are much deserved by the way. Now his damage is lower, the recoil got a slight rework compared to the flat-out nerf that Foot Soldier and Imp got, and some of his abilities were nerfed too. Pretty productive patch for the guy, wouldn't you say? This was bound to happen, so I have no issues with it. Finally, we have Engineer, who got one singular fix. Noted. So January was an incredibly small month for the vast majority of the roster, but for the unlucky few, it was a really rough one. But at the very least, we get to enjoy the piece for a little longer, with our next month being... So this was a patch that I had completely forgotten to mention in my first video, and yeah, it was a nothing patch. Frankly, it would be easier for me to tell you who made it in compared to who didn't. To make this one brief, Electric Slide got a fix to the upgrade that I can't pronounce right, Space Cadet got a fix to her Big Bang Beam, Scientist got a buff to his Healing Hose, and Wizard got a massive unlisted set of nerfs right before he came out, along with upgrade buffs. This right here is the only reason why this patch is even remotely noteworthy, and even then it's not like it was included initially, so who cares? Alright, now let's move on to... So March rolled around, and with it came some pretty interesting changes to these characters, specifically most of them being reworks. But alas, not everyone was included. Specifically, 80s, All-Star, and Wizard were left out of the fun here. It's a real shame, but it is what it is. Okay, now let's get into it. Foot Soldier got a slight rework to his Super Stink Cloud ability, and ZPG was also slightly buffed with its cooldown being reduced by 0.25 seconds. Nope, that is not a joke, by the way. Wow, I can see PopCap had their priorities with this update, huh? Imp also got a slight rework to an ability, with this one being for Gravity Grenade. I don't have much to add, so let's move on. Super Brains got a hitbox reduction and a health increase, as well as a shield rework of sorts. Oh yeah, I should talk about the health part, shouldn't I? So SB in this game did not have 175 HP for a while. I don't know why that's the case, but regardless, it's really interesting to see that he got this change in the second half of the game's life. Electric Slide got a Boogie Bolt rework too, and it got switched to automatic fire. Like with SB, if you didn't know, Slide's primary used to be something that you had to click in order to use. Needless to say, this is probably the best change to come out of the month for BFN easily. Funky Bouncer and Disco Tornado got fixes too, but if I'm being honest, nobody cares. Deadbeard got an anchor buff, surprisingly enough, and on top of that, Explosion got a fix and some of his upgrades were changed, such as Powder Keg getting fixed and no longer detonating a second time. Wait, what the frick? That was a problem? Space Cadet got some massive changes this month, holy frick. I won't cover all of them, but generally, Hands on Torpedo got a rework, Big Bang Burst got a nerf, Space Force also got an overall nerf, and some other abilities and upgrades got changed. That's a lot of information, but I suppose she needed it during this time period, so I won't judge. Scientist got the same automatic fire treatment that Slide got, and he also got a slight rework to Sticky Healy Thingy, as well as a buff to his heal spray and a few buffs to his healing upgrades. This month was a good one for Scientist players, especially since he got an upgrade later on that would prove to be devastating. You'll see. Finally, for this month, Engineer also got upgrade buffs and fixes, as well as a Bullhorn Swarm buff. Not much else to say for him, so that's it. March was a very interesting month for the zombies compared to the plants. Almost everybody here got a rework or two, which I just find to be interesting. But you want to know what's even more interesting? Well, that would be our next month. That being... Alright, here it is. The first of BFN's final 3 big updates. And yeah, this one is a doozy, so let's get right into it. Foot Soldier starts out with a very long list, but the general idea here is that his primary was nerfed, his ZPG was partially reworked, and some upgrades got messed with, like Rapid Fire getting a rework. Pretty interesting month all things considered. Imp also got a primary nerf, as well as nerfs to Missile Madness and Explosive Escape. But Bionic Bash did get a net buff here, so at least Imp isn't walking away with a complete loss. Super Brains got a huge series of buffs to Turbo Twister, an ability that's hardly even been discussed in this video. On top of this, Hybrid Jump Thump got nerfed, Super Ultra Ball got a slight rework, and a couple of upgrades got buffed or fixed. Overall, this was a big month for SB. This changes quite a lot about how his kit works. 80s finally got some good patch notes after a few months of being left out, and it's mostly slight reworks to his primary, Dynamite Dodge, and Camp Missile. Pretty small stuff, but at least it's something. Slide received a fix to Funky Bouncer and a rework to Disco Tornado, as well as a couple of upgrade changes. Not much to say, we'll move on. Deadbeard got a nerf to Barrel Blast, a button swap for canceling his anchor, and an explosion change. Again. Am I going crazy, or has this ability been changed like 5 times now? All-Star got an Imp Punt rework and a Sprint Tackle nerf. Not much to add, we'll move on. Space Cadet got nerfs to a bunch of things. So I guess her retooling in March was a little too much? Scientist now has Steam Blaster, which only got some fixes, but trust me, it'll be back soon. And he also got some upgrade buffs, and that's all she wrote. Let's continue. Engineer finally got automatic firing on his primary too, so that's neat. And on top of this, he also got some net buffs to Bullhorn Swarm, Double Time, and his Seismic upgrade. This was a good month for NG players. And finally, Wizard got a massive nerf to the XP he'd gained from Co-Star, as well as a general nerf to Shooting Star. Yeah, looking at these numbers for the XP, it's not hard to see why he was nerfed in this department. So May was a very packed month for the roster, but with that being said, we still have more to get through, so let's jump right on to the next update, which was in This was another patch that I basically ignored in my last video, but here with the zombies, it's just a little bit more important. But before we get into it, Foot Soldier, Deadbeard, and Engineer were left out. So with that being said, let's dive in. Imp got a minor rework to his primary, and the other changes here are fixes. Not much to add, we'll continue onwards. Super Brains now has Brainy and Basher, which means that it's in this month. And the only change you got was a bug fix. Nice! Other than that, most of these changes were fixes and quality of life changes. 80's got camera recoil added to his primary, so not much to say here. Wait a second, what the frick? You mean to tell me that until the last few months of BFN's life, 80's didn't have camera recoil? What? Slide got a quality of life fix to Funky Bouncer, with it now preventing plants from running. All-Star and Space Cadet both got a bug fix, so nothing to add there. But Scientist, on the other hand, got a Steam Blaster nerf, and this one was huge too. Yeah, if you didn't actually know, Steam Blaster used to genuinely be busted, and PopCap thankfully knew that, with it now getting massively nerfed. Finally, Wizard got some bug fixes. Underwhelming way to end it off, but whatever. So July was basically a bug fix month. It's kind of like the calm before the storm because the final update changed a lot of things for this roster, and that happened in... This is it, the final update to BFN. And yeah, this roster got some pretty massive changes, so let's go through the important ones. Some of the more notable changes to Foot Soldier were that he got a rework to his recoil, his ammo upgrades got massively buffed, especially bottomless, and liftoff was made usable. There's more here, but this video is long enough. At this rate, stopping the video and reading the notes is recommended if you believe I've skipped over anything. Okay, moving on. Imp's bigger changes includes a buff to his primary, Z-Mech gaining armor and a sprint, which neither were in the game before this update by the way, and Missile Madness getting one final rework. All things considered, productive patch for Imp. Super Brains got a nerf to Brainy and Basher, which is to be expected, but Reach now works with it, so I guess it got a buff anyways. And on top of this, other upgrades got huge buffs, like Extra Special not being a genuine pain to equip. Overall, good update for SP. 80's finally got some massive changes, and yeah, his primary was nerfed so hard. So I guess it's time to talk about it. 80's was low-key really freaking good right before the final update, but I suppose that because BFN was, and still is, seen as the black sheep of the shooter games, he was never really known to have been good until later on. But by the time it was figured out, he got nerfed anyways. And he's still top tier by the way. Funny how that works. Anyways, Dynamite Dodge also got a quality of life change regarding Rocket Ride, as it can now cancel that ability. And also, Rocket Ride could be moved around in. Wow. I can't believe that wasn't in the game sooner. Oh, and while I would love to go over the upgrade changes, I think just one needs to be addressed. The Huntsman went from 5 upgrade points to 4. That's all I really need to say, isn't it? Slide got not a whole lot of changes, admittedly, but overall she was buffed all across the board, except for Jazz Hands. Yeah, despite the patch notes telling us that it got buffed, it actually got fricked up by PopCap, and it no longer works like it's supposed to. Whoops. Deadbeard got a primary buff, as well as a massive Parrot Pal rework and some upgrade buffs. This is all around really good for the guy, good for him. All-Star got a dummy shield buff and a ton of upgrade buffs. Now the one that I want to give attention to in particular is Injury Time, which lost some upgrade points. Do you guys know what Injury Time does? It's basically the 2x revive upgrade that Foot Soldier and Nightcap have. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Space Cadet got so many changes that frankly, I don't think I could talk about all of them. Instead, I want to bring up the fact that Feedback Loop used to trigger on every critical hit. I don't have anything to add to that, I just wanted to bring it up for fun. Scientist got nothing but upgrade changes, and out of all of these, Materialize is by far the most interesting one due to the fact that it got heavily buffed. Oh, and Dolphin Blasting also got made usable. So I guess that means that Scientist got a whole new world opened up for him. Engineer got some changes to his base kit, and some of his upgrades got massively impacted too. I think Rally the Troops is by far the one that shocks me the most, because it got a net buff, which is something that an upgrade like this didn't need to begin with. Wizard got some nerfs to his primary, Co-Star, Stars Align, and Z-Elixir, as well as some upgrade changes. The one that intrigues me the most is Bottle Bouncer, which lost the bouncing gimmick. Wait, hang on, am I reading that right? Wait, what? Finally, we have TV Head, who got the exact same changes as Wildflower did. Getting an upgrade locked, gaining a melee attack, and Usain Yeti getting nerfed. And with that, that is almost everything in BFN's character patch notes. This was a fun set of videos to make, I can't lie. Looking into BFN's patch notes has given me a lot of knowledge on the game that I would have otherwise not had if I simply didn't check things out for myself. It's super interesting stuff to look at, though with that being said, maybe I should help the wiki, because there's some updates left out for some characters, and that's frustrating. But with that being said, thank you all for 10k subscribers, which is now 15,000 subscribers. I am so fashionably late to everything I make, holy frick. But if you guys are new around here and you like what you saw, then maybe consider subscribing too. It helps me out a ton. And with that being said, I have a certain list of zombies to deal with myself, so I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace.